Hey! I was extremely busy yesterday because the plumbers were not finished. Needed a governmental inspection for my new sewer line, so the hole hadn't been filled yet, so there's an enormous mess in the backyard, and that took forever, and there's an enormous mess in the basement, and that took forever, so that's why I've been absent. I took Sunday off, and then I came back on Monday to finish the job. One of the things that I keep encountering over and over and over again, and there are these few handful of things, there's actually a lot of things like that that I encounter in life where people completely don't understand. One of them is on the Termonada, also too via Negativa. But the big one is on Tesla's death ray. We talk about scalar waves, which is the worst word ever because there's no wave or transverse component in scalar. I got this really powerful, dangerous magnet too close to my iPad. Didn't want to ruin my iPad. Talk about Tesla. At the end of this video, I'd like to read you a few important quotes about his wireless energy. But anybody could quote you Tesla. That's not important. The important thing is to learn something. But first, I need to make a near-perfect analogy, specifically about lasers. And I grew up playing with lasers. I actually had helium neon lasers. This is a little laser pointer. And everybody, the same thing with light. Anything that has a speed, like a speed of sound or a speed of light, everybody on this earth suffers the same delusion, that if it has a speed, then it's moving from point A to point B. But light is not an emission. And sound is not an emission either. It's not. It's the rate of propagation of the hysteresis, great word, hysteresis of the medium, in this case the ether, as pertains to sound. It's the hysteresis of the oxygen and nitrogen, i.e. the air. The rate of propagation actually changes depending on temperature and density, which are both the same thing when it pertains to air. So it's not fixed. Neither is the so-called speed or rate of induction of light, which changes through glass and water, but nothing's actually moving. The same problem that people have, and a laser is a point source device. People say, well, a laser is coherent radiation. Well, attributionally, that's correct. And I am getting on the Tesla scalar here, but I need to make an important point about what scalar is relative to electromagnetic radiation, which is extremely lossy. Magnetism, by definition, is the dielectric field. In so losing energy, the dielectric manifests as this three-dimensional force vector, which, of course, creates the magnetic field, which thence, as an after effect, of course, creates space. So magnetism, by its very definition, is lossy, meaning the loss of energy or inertia. Negative image of infinity or of pure potential is pure impotency. Yeah? The negative image of counter space is, of course, the creation of space, not space itself, which has no properties. But one of the fundamental issues that people really suffer from is they think that all lasers, and this is not true at all, emit this parallel light. Well, it's coherent radiation. Well, that's attributionally correct, but what a laser is a point source object. A laser does not actually emit parallel light. I'd actually want to mention this to you about light and point source light pertains to a laser so I can more accurately define the analogy of Tesla's scalar. Most types of lasers actually emit spreading or non-parallel light. Lasers and CD players and laser pointers are semiconductor diode lasers. Also, like I said, played with helium neon lasers growing up. They create actually a cone-shaped beam, and if a parallel beam is desired, and they're in here too, they're little plastic lenses, they actually require focusing lenses. The same is true for lasers and inexpensive laser pointers. You take apart an old laser pointer like this, or any laser pointer, you'll find plastic lenses in front of the diode. Classic helium neon lasers, which I had a lot of growing up. I had a lot of science stuff experimented with growing up, create actually spreading light. They don't actually create, this little parallel lightsaber beam of light. They actually don't. The laser tube within a typical classroom laser contains at least one curved mirror called a confocal arrangement, and it creates, of course, light in the form of a spreading cone. It is an extremely little-known fact. It's almost nobody knows this fact, that manufacturers of classroom lasers, and most lasers for that fact, place convex lenses on the end of their laser tubes in order to shape the spreading light cone into a parallel beam. So lasers don't actually emit this little cone of light. And why is this important? We'll make an important analogy about so-called scalar or and I don't want to use the word scalar waves because there's no wave component, and that actually confuses people about scalar. And I actually posted a little diagram up in my community forum on Tesla scalar, that inverse to Hertzian phenomena. I'm trying to draw a simple analogy of creating, in the terms of a Tesla scalar, which is also too what Tesla called his death ray. These are like cavitation bubbles in the ether, also too made a representation of like a piece of fabric that is nailed to the wall. And you have your hands on the other end of the fabric, and you're actually shaking the fabric, and of course it creates these perturbations, exactly like light, exactly like electricity does, which is lossy. It is a fact, and a fact that Nikola Tesla stated over and over and over again, that wireless power transmission, while it is possible using electricity, electricity is not a field modality in itself, it's a hybrid. Phi times I equals Q in Planck of electrification. Electricity is the composite of dielectricity and magnetism, explaining how an electromagnet works. You know, like those big electromagnets that actually pick up dead cars at dumps, is extremely easy. If you actually have seen the inside of one of those electromagnets, it loses this dielectric component in counter space, and it actually creates this enormous magnetic field, and of course incredibly impressive. But Tesla scalar, I don't have a stick right here, I'd actually put, instead of a piece of fabric that I'm creating lossy perturbations in, imagine a piece of fabric, you know, that stretches from here, you know, to 10 miles down the road. I get to sit there and shake the fabric, but it's extremely lossy because the perturbations, which are transverse, exactly like electricity and exactly like light, which it'll encounter things, of course, in outer space. Light doesn't encounter much, obviously, so its propagation is nearly unlimited, even though it falls off depending on what the intensity is and the distance. Inverse square law, of course. You know, the piece of fabric will encounter, you know, air disturbance, where it's actually pushing against the air, which wants to be incompressible. So no matter how violently or how much energy I put into it, very little of the energy is going to be transmitted, say, you know, a mile or 2 miles down the road. In the case of Tesla scalar, it's point source light. It is not lossy because it has no transverse component. The little diagram that I posted on the community board, if you'd like to see it, it's a little diagram that I created talking about Tesla versus Hertzian wave phenomena, which of course would be the case of electricity, and TEM, or transverse electrical magnetic, has a transverse component. It is lossy. Just think about this a second, okay? Electricity, this is not my opinion, it's a fact, is a constituent of dielectricity and magnetism. It contains magnetism. Light, and this is a recent discovery, it's something I've known for a very, very long time. Scientists recently discovered the fact that light, or transverse electrical magnetic, whether it be radio or gamma radiation, they thought though there were nearly equal components of transverse electrical magnetic and of course the longitudinal rarefactions and compressions along the coaxial circuit that is light. They thought they were nearly equal, the transverse, whether it be circular or linear polarization of light, they were nearly equal. But it turns out that magnetism, as they discovered, is infinite number of powers higher than that of the electrical component of light, whether that be radio wave, gamma. And this is the reason why, say for example, a 2-meter repeater 10 miles down the road, even though I have line of sight, as long as we're not, you know, both in a valley or something, you know, if I were to actually have perfect line of sight, the reason why I need, for gain, a Yagi antenna, which is a directional lobal antenna, pointed at that source for highest gain. The reason why is because it's radio. It's light. Radio is light, by the way. It's all electromagnetic radiation, which contains an enormous amount of magnetism. Magnetism, by definition, is lossy. It's the same reason why a semi-tractor trailer, it's the reason why it is a much better analogy, and I'll get, you know, narrow in quickly on the point here. The reason why you ever driven up past on a freeway a giant tractor trailer, it's just creating so much of this buffering of the air. I mean, you can feel your car get whipped around as you go around a tractor trailer. It is extremely lossy and it requires a lot of fuel, more fuel, you know, to push that air out of the way. Obviously, it has a giant diesel engine. And the reason why super, super fast cars are basically designed to look like, you know, a torpedo, you know, with a torpedo point at the front and also too at the rear sometimes, so it actually creates the least amount of disturbance in the air, which of course requires more energy to part the air. In the case of light, in the case of electricity, these systems are incredibly lossy. Magnetism, by definition, is the loss of energy. With the footprint, the toroidal footprint of magnetism, you actually have a lossy footprint. This is the reason why Nikola Tesla, I'd like to get to his quotes here in a second, says that it's completely impossible to even think of this, because there are a lot of people that have looked at the Wardenclyffe Tower, so-called scientists. That never would have worked because the energy dissipation would have been so much at distance. It never would. It's like a pipe dream Tesla had. You know, he's a brilliant man, but it was all bunk. And I'd like to give you a quote from Tesla. It was not a transverse system. It was scalar. We could call it scalar. Of course, in the case of scalar, or Tesla's death ray, we're talking about volts per second, and it has no transverse component. It is not a lossy system. Tesla says this over and over again. He doesn't use the word lossy. He says with near nil or almost zero loss of power at distance. It was not a lossy system because it had no transverse component. But people don't understand that. People think of power, and including these people with PhDs that actually made videos for Nova, which I don't know if you've seen. Nova is a really prestigious scientific, as well as National Geographic. They said this never would have worked. You know, it had been lossy. It was like a pipe dream Tesla had. He's just getting old, and that's not the case at all. It had no transverse component. So we have to distinguish cycles per second, which contains a transverse magnetic component, along with the electrical, which is just a hybrid of magnetism dielectricity, with that of the the non-Hertzian system, measured in volts per second with no transverse component. So, also too, and I don't know if I get into talking about the electrical circuit here, like in an AC line. You actually have, and I want to make this more simple before we get in on Tesla's quotes here, important ones that you won't run across. They're quite, well, relatively rare and hard to find. That spatial energy, okay, electricity, light, this is also too circuit energy that has a spatial footprint. This is the most important diagram in the universe. If aliens landed, instead of, you know, some sort of nonsense, the first thing we should show them, aliens, and they would know that we're at least halfway intelligent, is this diagram. Yeah, this is a spatial diagram. This is also the cross-section of a magnetic field of a magnet. We actually have the toroidal transverse centrifugal divergent of the magnetic. This is like, see, the cross-section of a toroid. And we have the centripetal convergent of the dielectric. And right along the middle here we have the plane of inertia. This is also, too, the cross-section of the field of an AC circuit. It's also, too, the cross-section of a field in the AC power lines running in your backyard there. So it's spatial energy, electricity, light. It's circuit energy. Tesla's system was not circuit energy. Tesla's energy was counterspatial energy with no transverse component. Tesla coil, dielectric, scalar. We can also talk about Tesla's death ray, which of course death ray doesn't really mean anything, but he's referring to scalar. He called it a death ray because how powerful it was, near zero energy loss at distance. This is cavitation energy. We could come up, I actually referred to it as rarefaction compression propagation. We're talking about increasing nodal points with frequency. Whoops, lost my diagram here. So we're talking about transverse or Hertzian versus nodal points or cavitation energy with no transverse component. So an electrical field circuit, like I just mentioned, has a magnetic field and is a spatial circuit. A spatial circuit is lossy. Wireless spatial circuits are extremely lossy. They're subject to that because of their transverse components, both electrical and magnetic. And that's light and that's electricity. That was not Tesla's Wardenclyffe, okay? And I'm going to quote you Nikola Tesla here, see if I have enough time left. I'm looking over over the shoulder of the camera here. This is Nikola Tesla talking. The transmission across the Atlantic was not made by any device of Mr. Marconi's. When he says Mr. Marconi's, he's talking about electromagnetic. You know, there's radio. Doesn't matter whether it's radio. Doesn't matter whether it's X-ray or, you know, or light. He says Mr. Marconi is talking about electromagnetic system. But my system, Lars, I got too close to this magnet here. Of energy, I've already given notice to Cable, my friend. He's talking about informing of the fact of his invention. Its mode of operation, dimensionless, linear, and electrical, all constants of qualitative performance, so to make possible its exact reproduction and repetition experiments. Oh, the Marconi plants are inefficient. He's talking about electrical and transverse circuit energy plants. When he says Marconi, that's what he's referring to, if you don't know who Marconi is. And do not lend themselves to the practice of the discoveries of mind, meaning Tesla, the art of individualization. This makes the message of non-interfering and non-interferable and the stationary waves. You see, this is what Nikola Tesla calls them, stationary waves. What he's referring to is cavitation energy, or tunable, yes, tunable Tesla scalar. I don't want to say scalar waves, is what we call them, because scalar waves have no wave component. When you say scalar wave, it confuses people, because they think there's a wave component in there, and there's not a wave component in scalar. Do not lend themselves, anyway, individualization. Stationary waves, which annihilates distance absolutely and make the whole Earth equivalent to a conductor devoid of resistance. It's devoid of resistance because it is not a circuit. Tesla's Wardenclyffe was not a coaxial circuit. It was not an electrical system. It was not a transverse electrical magnetic circuit, radio, X-ray, gamma. It was none of those things. There's a lot of shows out there, including prestigious shows like Nova and really, really prestigious million-dollar productions. Wardenclyffe never would have worked because it was lossy. Tesla didn't know this. Like, these people don't know anything about field theory. They don't know the difference between electricity. They never heard of dielectric. They have no idea what magnetism is. They kept saying this about Tesla's Wardenclyffe Tower because they know nothing about field theory. Nothing. So, even here 100 years later, people have no idea what Tesla was actually building. Were it not for this deficiency, meaning the Marconi system, the number of words per minute, station now that distance absolutely. Anyway, I get on to the next quote here. These are all from Nikola Tesla. Nixon is a guy that poo-pooed his system as not being failed to grasp that my wireless system, meaning Tesla, the effect does not diminish with distance. The Hertzian system, wave system, has nothing to do with it. Very important. He's talking about its wireless transmission system. You get that? These people never read this from Tesla. These are Tesla's direct words. The Hertzian wave system has nothing to do with it, meaning my, i.e. Nikola Tesla's, Wardenclyffe wireless transmission system, except that in some apparatuses, mine might be used in their production. So Kuhnor might be in parallel with glass, whatever the hell it was. He's talking about other systems on the building of a system there. Revolutionary improvement of the wireless transmitter spectrum. Oh, the specter of interference, meaning being lossy, has been conjured by Hertz wave or radio telegraphy, in which attunement is absolutely impossible. He's talking about the deficiencies of Hertzian system, simply because the effect diminishes rapidly with distance. No duh, we know that. People were saying this about Nikola Tesla's Wardenclyffe Tower. It was not a Hertzian or transverse system. It was not a circuit. Like an AC circuit, like light, like electricity. Let me repeat that again. Nikola Tesla's wireless power transmission system was not Hertzian. It was not light. It was not electricity. It was none of those. You know how many inventions Nikola Tesla patented? You know how intelligent Nikola Tesla was? Even if you don't like Nikola Tesla, do you really think that Nikola Tesla went to all the trouble of constructing, which never got finished, his Wardenclyffe Tower, with the idea that it was going to be an electrical or a Hertzian or a transverse electromagnetic or a coaxial, i.e. circuit-based system? Of course it was not. It was none of those things. That would have been impossible because enormous amounts of power would have been lost over short distances. So, but my system of energy transmission based on the use of impulses, scalar. He calls them, I refer to it as cavitation energy. This is Nikola Tesla's words. He calls it impulse energy. Not sensibly diminishing with distance, with perfect attunement and the higher artifice of individualization are very practicable. As ever, the ghosts will vanish with the wireless dawn. He means the ghosts of the Marconi, i.e. the electrical system. So everybody misunderstands this about Tesla. They thought his system was electrical. And that's all these people know. Electricity is all there is. Nikola Tesla was an expert of field theory. He did not confuse electricity with dielectricity, nor with magnetism. Electricity is a hybrid of those two. It was not a coaxial or a circuit-based system, like you have in the power lines in your backyard out there, or in your front yard, as the case may be. So, last one from Nikola Tesla. When Heinrich Hertz announced the results of his famous experiments and confirmation of the Maxwellian electromagnetic theory of light, the scientific minds at once leaped to the conclusion that the newly discovered dark rays might be used as a means for transmitting intelligible messages through space. He's just actually going on about the electromagnetic or transverse electromagnetic circuit, which is extremely lossy. I don't know if you've seen these before. There's no such thing as pyramid power, and this is just the end note to this video, except for I have a few of these. They're very powerful. I don't want to get close to any of my electronic stuff here. This is a very, very powerful pyramidal magnet. It's made of actually 2 pyramids here. You can actually take a Gauss meter, and it's insanely high right here at the tip. What it acts like, in a very, very simple analogy, is like a fireman's nozzle. A fireman's nozzle is conical. It takes an enormous amount of high-pressure water, and it brings it to a fine point where it shoots out at incredibly high pressure. These high-pressure water nozzles, for example, they just taper to a cone with a small opening on the end of them. Literally, the one and only time on this universe where it's demonstrable and an empirical fact that there is such a thing as pyramid power is when it pertains to a very powerful magnet. Doesn't matter if it's samarium, cobalt, neodymium, or otherwise. That's shaped like a pyramid. It's actually so powerful here at the tip, you can actually take it near your wrist. You can feel it. It's like a light electrostatic charge. You can feel it on the tip of your nose and on the tip of your lip. You can actually take a Gauss meter and see how powerful it is right here at the tip. This is not my opinion or feeling or belief. This is a demonstrable, objective, empirical fact. I just wanted to show that to you because I haven't made videos about the fascinating attributes, and I use these for experimentation. I have a few of these pyramid magnets, and these are actually generated. These are actually placed in an array, several of them in a Hallback array, and what you have is a bunch of these pointing in one single spot in the center of a sphere or a semisphere. You have this incredibly powerful magnetic field, even though it's incredibly shallow, very close to the tip, where you can actually do experimentation. Don't want to get that too close to my iPad. Anyway, so that is Nikola Tesla's system. It's scalar. It is not lossy. It is not electromagnetic. It is not an AC circuit. So people are very, very confused on that, and I understand why. And there's all sorts of videos about Nikola Tesla's Wardenclyffe towers. It just never would have worked. It was wireless. What power drops off at short distances. It just never would have worked. Well, it was not an electrical system. It was not an AC circuit. It was not. It had no transverse component. Call it cavitation energy. Nikola Tesla called it impulse energy. Very, very close. There's a distinction between a piece of fabric, in the case of a Hertzian system, nailed to the wall, you have the end of the other fabric, and you're shaking it violently. You're creating cavitations in space and time. Nikola Tesla is like you take a long stick, you put it against the wall, and you hammer the other end that has no transverse component. You don't see energy propagation at all. In the case of Nikola Tesla's scalar system, instead of the wall, what you do is you'd have a tunable antenna for that power. It could be placed anywhere. It didn't have to be at the end of a stick. The end of the stick is wherever it was set to be tuned with the correct antenna for the reception of the scalar energy. Nikola Tesla told you think of the universe in terms of frequency, and you think of the universe in terms of frequency and vibration. You understand the secrets of the universe. So that was Nikola Tesla's wireless power generation system. It was not a Hertzian electrical circuit system. I hope I made that simple. I hope I didn't make it too occluded. Anyway, I hope you liked this video. Let me know. Either way, thank you so much.